Welcome, everyone. This is the ISSIP call, International Society of Service Innovation Professionals. We have an ISSIP awardee on the call, Luke Hohmann, and I'm just going to very quickly show the certificate that Luke earned and read. This is a Distinguished Recognition Award for the innovation of FirstRoot, which Luke is going to tell us all about in just a minute, for improving financial literacy, civic engagement, design thinking through participatory budgeting in schools. And it is a big topic in our ISSIP community about how do we collectively invest together better to bring about a better world. So I think this is going to be a great learning experience for the community, Luke. So congratulations on the award, and thank you so much for presenting to us now.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for this honorable award. It's one of those things where you don't build your company to seek awards, you build your company to create a positive impact. But when you get an award, it's really nice. And it provides shall we say, a spring in your step. You get a little extra like, yes, someone saw what we're doing and they noticed. And so what I thought would be appropriate is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and go through a deck that I prepared to give everyone a bit of a background about who we are and what we do and how maybe at the end you might want to also get involved. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and let's get started. And we're going to talk about how giving youth money can save democracy. We tell our youth that knowledge is power, but they see that power comes from money. And we tell our youth, you should get involved. But then we tell them, and you can't vote. So how can anything change if so few people control so much money? The statistics are something along the lines that 3 Americans control more wealth than almost half of America. And how can you make a change if you can't vote? Well, power can come from money, but change does come from people. And what we are building is the world's first platform for democratic financial decision-making in schools. How? We give students a real money budget, and we support them as they decide how to invest it. They make real change happen in their school with real money. They learn how to harness money power. Now that I have your attention, I'm going to go through the rest of the normal presentation. A little bit more about me. I'm a husband and father. I have 4 children, 2 in college, 2 in high school. I'm a serial entrepreneur, which is just Silicon Valley speak for I've started a couple of companies, some have succeeded, and I'm keep doing it. I'm a philanthropist. I'm a member of the Rotary, and I co-founded a nonprofit, Every Voice Engaged Foundation, which also seeks to improve civic engagement through a different set of techniques. And I'm known in the Agile software development community through the Agile Alliance and the Scrum Alliance, and I've written a few books. Now let's talk about participatory budgeting. What we do is we use participatory budgeting to teach financial literacy, design thinking, and civic engagement, but we haven't defined it, and we probably should. Participatory budgeting is a democratic process in which students are given real money to collaboratively invest in their school. Now, what's important to know about this is that we don't just go to the school and say, here's some money and walk away. Pedagogically, that is unsound, and it does not allow us to have an environment in which the students are generally learning and we are big fans of student-generated outcomes and project-based learning. So for those of you who are on the call who are fans of getting the students involved and not using what's called kill and drill, which is where you just try and drive facts into kids' heads, we're going to talk about a different approach. And this is definitely in the camp of project-based learning. In the first phase, the discovery phase, the students go into their community where the community is defined as the school, and they interview other students, they might talk with teachers, and they discover opportunities to improve their school. Then we go into a dream phase. Now the dream phase is the divergent phase associated with design thinking. In the dream phase, students create proposals. They log into our software and they submit their ideas. It could be build a new baseball field, or paint a mural, or plant trees, or buy a new library, or create a student rec center. These are all raw ideas. Now, those raw ideas may not be feasible, they may not be viable, they may not be desirable to the other students. So those raw ideas go into a design phase where we look at design thinking principles and we start to really hone in on that notion of financial literacy. What's the total cost of ownership? Is this an operating expense or a capital expense? And then we look at the design thinking aspects. Is it viable? Is it feasible? Going back into the civic engagement side, does this impact everyone in the school, or does this impact an underserved community? And is that what we want to do with our money? Eventually, those ideas are honed into concrete proposals that can be voted on. That's an important point, that can be voted on. Now, I want to point out that there's a special step right here, and I'm going to change my color to blue. Right here, the teachers and these school administrators get involved and they review these red proposals, the ones that are ready by the students. And the administration reviews those proposals for two reasons. First, we want to make sure that it is not inadvertently crossing the guideline of school policy. So for example, one school we work with, the kids wanted to change the lunchtime from 12:15 to 12 o'clock. Well, you can't change the lunchtime in the middle of the year. It has too many negative and ripple effects in the scheduling. In a school that we're working with right now, Fremont High School in Fremont, California, they're in their proposal review step, the students want to refurbish the softball field, but the school said no, because the softball field refurbishment is going into a bond measure that the Sunnyvale voters are going to go on next year. So the student is, the school is effectively telling the kids, don't spend your money here because we're going to, through our capital expense plan, we're planning on refurbishing the softball field. So the proposals that go through this filtering process are put into a ballot and the students vote. And that's the convergent phase of the design thinking. This is also a phase where we get to really talk about voting. We get to talk about voting algorithms. We get to talk about whether an algorithm is designed with bias. We get to talk about some of the undesirable aspects of our own country's structure, some of the good parts of electoral college systems, some of the less desirable parts of electoral colleges, the differences between representational and direct democracy, things like that. So it's really kind of an exciting opportunity where now the students are engaged. These are their proposals. They want to talk about voting. The last stage is the do phase, where the winning proposals are implemented. And those proposals can range from things that are purchased quickly to things that might take a few months to implement. Now, this whole process in a normal school from here to here, that takes about 2 months. So it's about 1 week for discover, 2 weeks for dream, 3 to 4 weeks for the design phase. There's more work in the design phase, and then about 1 week for the decide phase. The do phase is the variable phase, and it's based on what's decided by the students. You're going to ask me a few questions, so let's get them out of the way. Why are we doing this? Well, wealth and income inequality is causing massive harm. This is the data from McKinsey. Now, the data shows that there's at least a 10x gap between the population or the wealth, the total wealth of white versus colored families. So we know this, right? And Jim's nodding and things like that. But what we don't really dig into is what happens because of this wealth gap. You might think, what's the problem? Of course, there's going to be gaps in society. Why is this a big deal? Well, it's a big deal when you add in the social science research. This book, The Spirit Level, and I know it's a little hard to read, but what they did was they studied the health of the impact of income and economic inequality on health and social factors. And they found that the more unequal the society, the worse the society performs on a whole range of socioeconomic factors. So the United States has the worst infant mortality, the highest homicide rate, the highest imprisonment rate, the highest rate of teenage pregnancies and birth, the lowest level of societal trust, the highest levels of obesity, the highest levels of mental illness, the highest addictions, the lowest social mobility, the lowest math and literacy scores, and the lowest life expectancy. So there's this massive impact into our society caused by this massive wealth gap. Now, you might think, well, that's a poor person problem, and I'm wealthy, right? If you're listening to this phone call, chances are you're highly educated, chances are you have a above average paying job, chances are you work for a company that's providing above average benefits. So you might be thinking, I'm okay. Well, actually, you're not. You could be better, because the data from McKinsey shows that by closing the racial wealth gap, the US GDP could be trillions of dollars higher, meaning everyone benefits through greater economic equality. It's hard to sometimes accept that when we're wealthy, but this is not an argument of taking money from the poor and putting it in, or taking money from the rich and giving it to the poor. This is not a wealth redistribution strategy. This is a strategy that says, by removing and eliminating and lowering obesity, by lowering mental illness, by lowering drug addiction, by lowering homicides and imprisonment, we can change the directions of this curve and create wealth for all. This is a really important message. Now, the second part about this is why the focus on civics. Well, social media, and most specifically Facebook, is tearing our society apart. We've got irrefutable data that the time spent on Facebook is hurting us. Now, these data were already showing, and this is before Facebook, obviously, that every Western democracy is plummeting in its trust. Now, in terms of how we get there, this data was from 2018 from the Pew Research Center. It shows that citizens in Russia were at least circa 2018 more satisfied with their country than citizens in America. And now we're seeing the outgrowth of that, and we're seeing this dangerous war, this horrific war in Ukraine. So there's these really massive issues that we're facing, and we've got to change these trends. And I contend that the best way to change a trend like this is to give students a positive experience that they can point to that said, we had a democratic experience in our school, we made choices to improve our lives, let's take that into our communities when we graduate. By giving lived experiences of positive outcomes, we can change the trajectory. Now, you're going to ask a few more questions. How much money are we talking? Where does the money come from? Well, it's actually a modest amount of money of $2,000 to $10,000, meaning, and I say this in kind of a fun way, we want enough money in the program that it is meaningful for the kids, but not so much money that the adults are going to take over. We don't want the adults to take over. So we don't allow the money to get too big because we're building trust. Now, the sources of those funds are school principals or school district budgets, parent-teachers associations or parent-teacher organizations, or even some corporate social responsibility programs or nonprofit partners. So for example, Rotary has been involved. We've had some financial services firms involved. We've had the League of Women Voters involved. So there's these organizations that really do care about civic engagement. Now, what do kids do with the money? Here's some examples of programs. At Purdue Polytechnic High School, they got a new library and a pergola, a place to read books. Sometimes it's fun stuff. They bought some fidget toys at Hegel Elementary in Madison. And sometimes it's very profound. At the Academy of American Studies, they bought more feminine care hygiene products for the girls' bathrooms. So it can get very profound in terms of some of the choices that the students make. What teachers, not every teacher wants to be a project-based learning teacher. This I understand. But when teachers are motivated by project-based learning and project-based thinking, they literally love it because it's a real world challenge. And notice that they're using costs and logistics of these project proposals. So for example, you can compare the kind of math problem that we often give students. Bob and Satish are going to the store to buy apples. They have $17. Apples are $2.39 a pound. How many apples can we give them? Who cares? And half the time the smart kids are going, well, why are they buying that many apples? Shouldn't they buy a balanced meal? I mean, it doesn't matter. But with these kids, when they say, we would like to get more fidget toys, well, now we get to ask a question. Okay, is that for you or for everyone? And what grade levels? And what kind of fidget toy do you need? And how many do you need? And could you get a discount if you bought them in bulk? These are the legitimate real world questions that we go through in our own personal lives. Now, how does our system work? Well, we're trying to bring Silicon Valley usability into our experiences with schools. I am a father, as I said earlier, and I see the kind of software that is ed tech software. Most of it's garbage and it's hard to use, it's hard to understand. So we've put a lot of design thinking into our own process, dozens and dozens of usability studies with kids to make sure our software is usable. But it's simple. You create an account, you configure your program, you invite your kids, the software guides them through every phase, and when you're done, you purchase the student-funded proposals. So we've got a self-contained system that's designed to be very easy. We also have an optional curriculum that teaches financial literacy and civics. So the software lives here and the curriculum lives here. The software can be used with any curriculum. If you choose to use our curriculum, it does expect that you're going through participatory budgeting, but our software can be used with any financial literacy curriculum that's on the market right now. So when teachers are asking us for a little bit of guidance, we make no restrictions on what the students purchase. But if we're asked, we tend to recommend capital expenses because capital things that you can purchase are more tangible, especially to the younger grades. So we want to have things that the students can look at, can purchase, can understand, and can see tangibly. Here's a couple of screenshots. I know it's a little hard to see all the details, but what we did in designing our software is we took design cues from the platforms that our children use, games like Among Us, interaction systems like Discord, Instagram, Snapchat. We tried to kind of grab that colorful, simple, direct ethos of design. For voting, you can see that this is the voting bar. It keeps track of the total cost of the proposals. The students can indicate if they want to fund it, or if they don't like it, they can indicate if they don't like it. And there's a simple navigation mechanism for navigating their ballot. We've designed our voting ballot over time to have a metacognitive capability so that the students can vote on how to vote. And eventually we'll be supporting other voting algorithms like majority, quadratic, ranked choice voting, other forms of voting that are important for our children to understand, because as adults, we've got different parts of the United States and other parts of the world doing different voting algorithms, including ranked choice voting, including quadratic voting, et cetera. Now, we're building civic engagement into the system itself. So two ways that we're building civic engagement into the platform. One is multiple schools can run their programs together, and that way that proposals that affect multiple schools can be shared by all, and they can create a larger sense of community. In addition to this, one school can create a proposal that funds a PB program in another school. So we call that a pay it forward proposal. So the students themselves can kind of drive out the virality of the program. Now, who am I and why am I relevant and important, useful for doing this? Well, my last company, Contenio, was founded to create participatory budgeting solutions in business. So we focused on these techniques for portfolio management, and our clientele were large companies. And I started that in 2010. In 2012, I started Every Voice Engaged Foundation to bring these techniques to governments and schools. And so my for-profit entity was effectively funding the nonprofit work, which is an acceptable solution, and it's not uncommon. Well, in 2019, I had an opportunity to sell my company, and that was a good outcome for my employees, so we did it. And in 2020, when COVID hit, I realized that participatory budgeting was going to be dying out in schools because COVID was forcing kids out of the school, and there was no platform for participatory budgeting that was appropriate for schools. There are a few open source platforms out there in the market for cities that do participatory budgeting. And Europe is a little ahead on this in terms of where those platforms are, but there was no purpose-built platform for teaching financial literacy and civics through participatory budgeting in schools. So sometimes entrepreneurs start companies because they want to make a ton of money. And sometimes entrepreneurs start companies because they feel a calling. I felt a calling to bring this into the world through this process. So I started FirstRoot for this process. Of course, we do expect to make enough money to have a viable and successful business, but there's also a deeper purpose to this company. I'm also excited that global trends create future opportunity. If you do a small amount of digging, you'll find that participatory budgeting is formally endorsed by the United Nations. The United Nations points out that participatory budgeting is directly relevant to 7 of the 17 SDGs. It started in Porto Alegre, Brazil, and it expanded into other places around the world. It's relatively new to North America, but we think that this is an opportunity to create a global option for serving the world. Thank you very much. I am very appreciative for this opportunity, and I'm very excited to be part of the ISSIP community. Now, Jim, I know that we've got a few minutes left, so I thought I would turn it back over to you. If you had any questions on behalf of the membership, I can field a minute or two.
That would be great, Luke. Thank you so much. This is wonderful. And thanks so much for sharing it with the community. Congratulations again on the award. My first question was going to be, how many different voting algorithms do you have? But you answered that. And I'm so glad you talked about ranked choice, because I think that is a really excellent thing that a lot of people don't know, that there's multiple voting schemes out there. And so that's really great. And the other thing that you touched on at the end, you showed the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I think that was fantastic. And I would say participatory budgeting applies to even more of those UN sustainability goals than shown. So that was great. And I just want to end with, you started with a very powerful set of observations, and this notion that money is power, which it certainly is. But you also talked about, people make change. And I thought that was, that message is so important, that people can make change if they can coordinate their activities. And it's a fantastic way to coordinate activities when there are resources that can be put to different purposes. It is a research direction in the service research community to think about better ways for responsible actors to invest. So I guess, do you have a set of university partners or others who are starting to maybe do some research? These are fantastic case studies that you're developing. Have you thought about having a university research partner as part of the journey?
Oh, absolutely. There's a couple of areas in which we really do want to be able to, I'd say, improve our research foundation. One of the things I like to distinguish is the difference between outputs and outcomes. And right now, we're at the stage of our company where we're predominantly measuring outputs, because when you're early in an innovation, it's not always clear what outcomes you want to affect or what ones are likely to be affected. So you start to measure outputs. So we're measuring what I would say are the outputs: how many schools, how many students, how much money. But the outcomes that we want to impact are we helping students build financial literacy? And does that help them have a better life? And are we building systems of civic engagement? For example, an output would be, are we getting students to register to vote? And an outcome would be, are they actually voting? Or do students whose schools adopt participatory budgeting have communities that are more engaged as the students age? So we're looking for research partners who can help us do longitudinal research, because these questions are not simple, very fast questions and answers. They need service study designs and research design that lets us track, say, a ninth grade class through 4 years of doing this in high school. And then what happens when those kids have had this positive, consistent experience when they come into the community. And I think the other element about the research is this the kind of work that has the impact later in life? Meaning, I could envision a scenario where the kids have a very favorable experience, but they go to college, and we know the stresses of college. I've got to get through my college. And then we graduate from college, and we typically are starting our families. So now I've got my stresses of work. I've got my young kids. I may not have a lot of time for civic engagement, but does this plant the right kind of foundation so that maybe when their kids are just a little bit older and maybe they start school, those new parents might join the PTA, and we have that as a form of the realm. And they say, I joined the PTA because I did this PB program in school, and I want to bring back student voice, or bring student voice and student equity into the school I'm in because I had that experience. So those are the kinds of questions that I think would be very compelling to explore, and with the right research design would help us all improve our society.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Luke. I'm going to just share the award one more time, and we'll get this posted up to the ISSIP YouTube and share it more with the community. Thanks so much for your time today, Luke. I'll go ahead and stop the recording.